All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to try and solve a legal puzzle that gets right to the heart of how our entire court system actually functions. And believe me, the first clue is right around the corner.
Okay, so picture this. You're a magistrate in Western Australia. You've got 4 different court decisions sitting on your desk. One's from the High Court, another from South Australia's Supreme Court, one from a court just above you in WA, and the last one from the absolute top court in your state. They all seem to have something to say about your case, but which one do you actually have to listen to? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
Now, before we can even think about solving this thing, we've got to get our heads around the basic rule of the game. It's a concept called judicial precedent. You can think of it as the invisible scaffolding that keeps our whole legal system standing strong and straight.
At its core, judicial precedent is a pretty simple idea. Like cases should be treated alike. It just means that a decision a court makes today is heavily guided by decisions made in the past, especially those from higher courts. This is what stops the law from being a total free-for-all, changing its mind every other day. Okay, and this is really the key to the whole thing. Not all precedents are the same. Some are what we call binding. This means the court has zero choice. It must follow that decision. It's like a one-way street. But others are persuasive. The court can look at them, consider them, maybe take inspiration from them. It's more like a suggestion from your GPS. And what's the big difference? Well, it all comes down to where that court sits in the legal food chain.
So, if we're going to figure out which is which, binding or persuasive, we need a map. We need to see the lay of the land. And in the legal world, that means understanding the court hierarchy.
Yep, that's exactly right. The court system isn't a flat playing field. It's structured like a pyramid. The decisions made by the courts at the top have to be followed by the courts down below. Power flows downwards.
And this pyramid right here shows us the exact layout for our puzzle. At the very, very top, you have the High Court of Australia. They have the final say on everything for the whole country. Then, underneath that, each state has its own little pyramid. Our court, the Magistrates Court in WA, is right at the bottom, looking up to the District Court, then the Supreme Court of WA, and finally, all the way up to the High Court.
Now, this is a super important point. Think of each state, WA, South Australia, Victoria, as having its own separate pyramid. So a decision from the top of the South Australian pyramid, its Supreme Court, is a big deal over there. But it's not directly in the chain of command for a court in the Western Australian pyramid. They're like 2 separate companies. The manager of one can't tell an employee at the other what to do.
Okay, so we've got the rules of precedent, and we've got our map of the court hierarchy. It's time to get back to our magistrate's desk and start analyzing those 4 options. Let's do this. First up, the High Court of Australia. This one is pretty much a no-brainer. As the absolute top court for the whole country, its decisions are binding on every single court below it, no exceptions. That includes our little magistrates court in WA. So, classic case of binding precedent. Okay, next, let's look at the decision from the Supreme Court of Western Australia. Let's go back to our map. The Supreme Court is right there, directly above the Magistrates Court inside the same state system. As the top court in WA, its rulings are absolutely binding on all the lower courts in that state. So this one's also binding. Now for option 2, the Supreme Court of South Australia. Remember those separate pyramids? Here's where it really matters. A decision from SA comes from a different hierarchy. Now, a magistrate in WA might read that judgment and think, wow, that's a really smart way to look at this problem. It can be very influential or persuasive. But are they forced to follow it? Nope, they're in a different pyramid.
And that brings us to our last option, the District Court in WA. Now, this is the tricky one. It's in the same state, and it is a higher court, so you'd think it would be binding, right? But here's where the law gets a little particular. In our system, only the decisions from the top-tier courts, the superior courts of record, like the Supreme Courts and the High Court, create that absolutely binding precedent. An intermediate court, like the District Court, is seen as highly persuasive. A magistrate has to take it very, very seriously, but they aren't technically bound by it in the same way they are by a Supreme Court decision. And that is the answer to our puzzle.
So let's just pull it all together in one place. This table makes it super clear. The decisions from the big guns in the direct line of command, the High Court and the WA Supreme Court, they're binding. You have to follow them. But decisions from outside that direct line, like from another state or from a court that's in between, like the District Court, are persuasive. So we've solved the puzzle, we've found our answer. But what's the big deal? Why go through all this trouble with hierarchies and binding versus persuasive precedent? Why does any of this actually matter? Well, it really all boils down to these four massive ideas. It gives us fairness, so you know your case won't just be decided on a whim. It gives us consistency, so the law is the same whether you're in Perth or Albany. That leads to predictability, which is huge because it lets all of us plan our lives knowing what the rules are. And finally, it creates efficiency, so courts can build on all the legal wisdom from the past instead of having to reinvent the wheel every single time.
There's this great quote that I think just nails the whole idea. The law must be stable, but it must not stand still. See, this whole system of precedent, it's designed to provide that stability. It's the anchor. But that second part of the quote, that reminds us that the world is always changing.
And that really leaves us with the big, fascinating question, doesn't it? If our entire legal system is built on respecting and following what's already been decided, how in the world does it ever adapt? How does it evolve to handle things like AI or new social values or challenges nobody could have imagined a century ago? Well, that is the ongoing puzzle that courts and lawyers are trying to solve every single day.